homeland or a place of their choosing, and be able to stay there and continue to live with the respect of their fundamental rights. So if you look at the requests that the Rohingya community leaders have made, the conditions that have to be met before they even consider return, this is a clear reflection of what I'm talking about. Access to citizenship, pathway to a normal, thriving life, and exercise of the rights that come.
Now, shall we go to our next speaker? Please go on.
Very good, thanks. I don't, in my view, to speak on behalf of UNHCR, I don't think the articulation of solutions to the situation is that difficult. It's the implementation. The solutions look like, sound like, something that the keynote speaker set out this morning, and it was recapitulated at the beginning of this session. Or in the language of UNHCR, it's an initiative called the Solidarity Approach, or in the language of all the countries in the world that join hands in the Global Compact on Refugees, it's those four elements. It's easing the pressure on Bangladesh. It's creating the conditions for sustainable return in Myanmar, which means respect for fundamental rights, the implementation of the Rakhine Advisory Commission report, progress under the MOU. It's a matter of political will and really addressing things. Thirdly, it's increasing the opportunities for Rohingya to pursue other solutions, other third country solutions. Again, links to the easing the burden on Bangladesh. And it's about self-reliance, right? So that people are better equipped when they do go home, as the principal solution, to look after themselves. So I don't think there's anything mysterious about what needs to happen. The difficulty is making it happen. The voluntary return that's been agreed to by Bangladesh and Myanmar should be completed by the end of the year, and that's clearly not going to happen. But why is that not happening? Myanmar points the finger at Bangladesh and says they're holding the Rohingyas hostage and holding them back. That's clearly not the case. The refugees tell us and tell anybody who will listen that they want to go back, but they're afraid to because security guarantees aren't there, and the things to which they're entitled, like the homes, if they're not being raised, and basic human rights are not guaranteed. So that's where I would leave it. We know what to do. It's a question of getting it done. And I think fresh ideas are even there, but the essence of the problem is known to us, and it hasn't changed.
Thank you very much. Let me give you a little bit of where I'm coming from before I give you my analysis of what we need to be thinking about in this context. So I'm an environmental specialist, and I work particularly on climate change. Neither of these are primary issues with regard to the political context in which we are looking at the Rohingya situation in the Cox's Bazar region of Bangladesh. But they are relevant, and they will become even more relevant as we go forward, in two senses. Firstly, the area that the Rohingya refugees are in is one of our most pristine environmental forest areas. That used to be a pristine forest. 2 years ago, if you look at a satellite image of that area, it was a pristine forest with wild elephants going up and down. We put almost 1 million people in one of the biggest, if not the biggest, refugee camp in the middle of that wild elephant park. Initially, some of the wild elephants actually trampled some of the people, but we have successfully managed to get the elephants to go around the camp now. It's been an interesting experiment to do that. And we now have a huge number of Rohingya refugees living there. In another piece of information to share with you is that in Bangladesh now, we all know Bangladesh is one of the most vulnerable countries to the impacts of climate change. There was a study done about a year ago by the government of Bangladesh with support from the German government to identify the most vulnerable parts of Bangladesh. And they came up with a list of about 5 regions: the coastal region, the flood-prone region, the Howrah region, the Barind, etc. The Cox's Bazar region was not on that list. But if we were to do that analysis again today, I think Cox's Bazar would be number 2 on the list just after the coastal area, because of the influx of the refugees. And so going forward now, in terms of developing Bangladesh as a national strategy for dealing with the impacts of climate change, the region of Cox's Bazar is now a priority region for us to consider, both for the host population as well as the Rohingya population, whether they stay or they don't stay, and definitely for the environment around the population that's there. So there is now, going forward, a very, I would say, much higher priority for environmental factors to be taken into account, which weren't earlier. Earlier it was a humanitarian issue. You know, we cut the trees and put them up because we had to do it. But right now, we need to take the environmental factors back into consideration and think about how we include them in whatever we plan to do going forward. So I would argue for whatever the government and the agencies involved are thinking about going forward, we do need to think about the environmental issues much, much more seriously than we did before. Thank you.
It is always difficult to speak as an academic, but I would like to be realistic here, and I would like to bring a different perspective than any other speakers on the panel. Because I was born in Myanmar, so I know pretty much about the perspective of the Myanmar people in its government. Let me start off with the 1970 and 79 exodus of this Rohingya population. That was the first wave, major wave of exodus. Then we saw 1991, 92. Then again, 16, 17. It's been about that major exodus of this population. And today we hear from the UN estimates that there are over 1 million Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh. And now I'm going to give 3 possible avenues or solutions that we should explore. This is purely based on the paper I presented just before this panel. I was presenting a paper on Myanmar perspective on the Rohingya crisis. And I had 3 things. The first one, I still believe that it is the responsibility of Myanmar, its military leadership, the civilian leadership, and the general public to embrace and welcome, accommodate these Rohingyas back to the country. And I think if this happens, this would be the best possible solution to the Rohingya crisis. But at the same time, I'm not very optimistic about this happening. Why? I have already mentioned 3 stages or 3 major exoduses. Then here is the second component. And a few years ago, in fact 2 years ago, the then UNHCR chief, now who is the President Secretary General of the United Nations, in response to the Burmese President Thein Sein, he said, Rohingyas are not eligible for resettlement because they do not fit into the definition of refugees which are to be resettled in that country. But I think after this a couple of years, what has happened? I think the international community should explore an option for a third country resettlement as well, as one option. And the third avenue that we should also explore, I don't think this is something that would be appreciated by the crowd here, but let me be very frank here. According to UNHCR policy, they have 3 different what we call policies or programs that they implement toward a long-term solution to refugee crisis. One is resettlement, repatriation. The third one is local integration. And I don't know whether every one of us who are gathered here today believe that over 1 million population or refugees would really be going back to Burma. So is there a possibility we should explore maybe some kind of local integration as well? I know this may not be a good case to many of you here, but I'm not saying that either of these three should be exclusively pursued. What I rather suggest is that maybe we should have a comprehensive strategy looking at the possibility of these possible avenues or solutions that can bring a long-term solution to the Rohingya crisis. And I know it's hard and it's sensitive, and of course it's controversial, but I think as academic, this is what I see. In fact, I just got this an article in London by Journal of Muslim Minority Affairs. The title is "The Rohingya Crisis: The Centrality of Identity and Citizenship." And right now, I do not see. Of course, as we speak, there are Burmese ministers coming and visiting Cox's Bazar. I do not see a serious political will from the Myanmar leadership to bring these people back to the country. Maybe they would bring some, but not all of them. That's according to my very honest academic analysis.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moderator. I think we have got a very interesting and varied views, but we have not focused on the solution. Actually, we have, even though we see there is a solution, I think very important for us to look at the issue. One is whether all that we are suggesting, the methodology, the approach, whether it is pragmatic or not. One, if it is not pragmatic, what is doable? I think we have come up with one suggestion, doable in our colleagues' views. The doable thing is for local integration. Of course, that is the simplest method to absorb. But I'm worried if this be the approach that any government takes or any other ASEAN country takes. ASEAN is a very multicultural, very diversified country. Then there will be other crises where we will be pushing our people out and they will land in another country and we say let them be integrated. So I'm a bit concerned about that. And I think that also will take us away from accountability and responsibility. And that is an important issue. And I know that I think Myanmar will not implement the agreement between Myanmar and Bangladesh. That's my view. I mean, totally wrong. Because they feel this is a good way out. The best thing is to drag the issue for a long time until it is not given attention to, and Bangladesh will be the sufferer. So, I think another important issue that you have brought up is the political will. I spoke to the president of the interfaith in Myanmar. And I met him and had a discussion. He said, you know, the best way, these people are not our people. If you're so interested on them, why don't you take them? And if you're so interested, we have got a country that has offered to resettle them. Gambia wants to take, you know, the president of Gambia sometimes he come up with fantastic approach about quick solution. So I said, Excellency, revered you know, monk. I think you see that they are not from here. Let us look at the geography and history of the world. History of the world has been new geographies are created. New movement of people are created. If you say they are not from here, they are all along the borders. You live along the borders, you tend to look alike, you know. Sometimes I'm mistaken for Pakistani, sometimes I'm mistaken for Bangladeshi, sometimes I'm mistaken for Arab. But that's the nature of human being. We all originate from Adam and Eve. So, but if he says, you know, you say Rohingya are not from here. Okay, assuming that I take that view. Definitely they have been in this part of the world for hundreds of years, for centuries. So you have no, and even in your case, I mean, sorry to say, of course you're from Chin, isn't it? So even the Burman, they do not come from Burma. They are from the plain of Tibet and Bhutan. So all of us move. And there are so many, so I think it is, in my view, no matter how difficult it is, we must settle them back to Myanmar. Because otherwise, you know, you have got, I think 2 years was a very impractical solution, sorry to say, because Myanmar, I think based on experience in dealing with them, they mentioned, I was told that, they said, you know, you have to get rid of all in order for you to bring back. You have to get rid of the hate speeches, the violent narrative, saying all these things, and then you cannot burn house of prayers of these people. It will, you know, but they say that they believe that they can do it by taking slow process, step-by-step process. And this, don't forget, the solution to me, because of time factor, to me the solution lies not only with the United Nations, but there is a selective or differential treatment on tackling the issue of Rohingya. Why I say that, you know, this is where it is proven, and we have seen that in South Asia, we had one genocide in Cambodia. 2 million people were just killed. It took a long time to resolve. And now we have another evidence of genocide, and we do not take action and say, it's all right. You move to Malaysia. I think one of my Indonesian, I was talking to one of the ministers, I cannot quote his name because otherwise he will get into trouble. In Myanmar, I said, why has it reached this extent? His argument is that, he says, you know, I know that these people are not foreigners. They are part of the Rakhine state. But it is a political issue that we cannot find a way to resolve. So I think I like to, as human beings, I like to conclude by saying that there must be an immediate scheme, and we must divide it into strategic plan. Easier for us to say, Myanmar must accept. You must have an immediate. Immediately, what can they accept? And then you must have mid-term, then you have longer term. If you say that immediately 20 years, I think after 20 years, that would be another Palestine.